I'm here today with William Alden, who's clerk of the Stationers' Company, and here we are at the heart of the city in Stationers' Hall. And what we're going to discuss briefly are the changes that have happened and are happening in industry today, particularly in the financial services industry, but are changes that have occurred throughout history in all sorts and just about every single industry. Now, William has got some short stories to tell us about change and how change has happened in the past and how it affects us today and how we can manage it going forward. William, tell us more about stationers and how stationers and the livery has worked in the area of change.
David, it's particularly apposite that I should be speaking about the history of the Stationers' Company, because we are, as an organisation, 600 years old. And obviously, any organisation that old will have faced a lot of change. A lot of people are interested in livery companies because of their history, but there's only one historical fact that I believe is important about the Stationers' Company, and that is that it was founded by manuscript writers and manuscript illuminators in 1403. They hadn't been going for more than 100 years or so when a chap called Wynkyn de Worde turned up here and said, guys, I'm going to set up a press in Fleet Street. And these manuscript writers and illuminators, with their pens and paintbrushes, had the remarkable foresight to say to him, I tell you what, Wynkyn, why don't you join us? And he became the first printer to be a stationer, and the company's never looked back from that moment onwards. The point of that story is that 500 years later, we face as big a change as they did when printing was invented. With the digital revolution, our industries are changing very rapidly. And if we're to have another 600 years of history, the Stationers' Company needs to change to reflect that.
And how do you think the banking industry should perhaps change to make a better future for itself?
I think the most important part about change in any organisation is not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And in order to avoid doing that, you've got to understand well what the key ingredients are of your organisation. One thing livery companies can't do is stop being livery companies. We would have no point if we change to that extent. So the challenge is to keep the inherent elements of a livery company, but modernise those to make them relevant in a fast-changing industry.
So to stay current, to keep up the pace.
Pace is an interesting word because, of course, pace is accelerating, and that's one of the challenges, is that in the old days, they probably had more time in which to evaluate the potential impacts of change. Today, we have to move more quickly. But yes, of course, it is all about reflecting what's different. So, for example, we have a company that is principally consisted in the past of printers, publishers, and paper people, predominantly interested in production. And I want to shift that very subtly over the next 10 years or so towards content, on the basis that it doesn't really matter how stuff's produced, it's the content that matters.
The content is king.
The content is king, yes. And I think for us that means more journalists, more broadcasters, and more digital web publishers. That is the area where I'd like to see our focus change.
So that's communication, innovation, two big tenets. But there's a third one that maybe you might like to touch on, which I think is particularly important to the financial marketplace at the moment. And it, of course, applies to all industries, not just financial, not just stationers, but it's the concept of trust, yes. Maintaining a commitment and a process of trust in the active marketplace. How do people maintain that through change and turmoil?
It isn't easy. Organizations do have within them certain inherent values, and as long as you're not seen to be dramatically undermining those values, I think the public will forgive some lapses. And behind me is a list of honorary freemen and liverymen, probably out of camera, but it contains a list over the centuries of the great and the good in the media industry. Now, they won't all have been perfect characters, and the media industry is well known for the fact that some people haven't behaved perhaps as well as they should have. That hasn't damaged the stationer's values because, as I say, one or two lapses are fine, as long as you are seen to ultimately be maintaining your true values. Now, in the banking industry, of course, I think there are inherent values that one could establish, and it's a question really of getting the message across that those values are still there, or we are returning to them in order to rebuild the trust and confidence of the public.
Well, it appears that one bad apple is spoiling the apple cart, but we all know the story about rogue traders, and it is a story about individuals who take actions that it's not reflective on everybody else.
That's absolutely right, and I think that applies in all industries. And most industries will survive that. And one of the problems of today's modern instant news world is that individual incidents can get blown up, but they are over very quickly. And as long as the institution stands firmly behind its values, it can survive.
And succeed in the face of change.
Well, again, change to what you do, innovation is important. You don't have to change your values. And I think that these are subtle nuances here. Clearly all British institutions have to change and are changing. The monarchy is a good example, the army, the church. One has to change to reflect changes in society and different aspirations of people. But there are certain core values that should only be changed in a more subtle way. And although one might see over centuries a change, for example, livery companies started largely to protect monopolies. You couldn't print in the City of London unless you were a member of the stationer's company. Now, clearly that as a value no longer exists. In conclusion, the important point is change, innovate, yes, things have to be different, but try to retain the core and inherent values of the organization through that change process. That way, you'll take people with you through the change.
And keep communicating with them effectively.
And of course, keep communicating effectively. I'd have to say that as the delivery company for the communications industry.
Right. Well, on that note, William, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. David, thank you.
Thank you.